Joining us now, ladies and gentlemen, the greatest coach in the history of college ball. A man who's a living legend, actually, and fantastic on television. He was cold as shit last Friday in Columbus. But on this Thanksgiving Eve, I assume he's doing just fine. Ladies and gentlemen, Nick Saban. How you doing, Coach?
How's it doing?
Hey, I'm fantastic. Thank you for making this work on a Wednesday because obviously we don't have a show on Friday. We'll be down there in Texas. You're the man for that. Let's talk about what we were just chatting about. I think you heard the end of that. The Miami Dolphins lose to the Kansas City Chiefs last year in the playoffs, ice cold. Everybody says this team can't handle the cold. Now they got a Thanksgiving game going into Lambeau, and they get a chance to kind of exercise the demons and showcase that they're the newest college football playoff bracket, projected bracket. Now, granted, this can all change with the conference champions and everything like that. Has two SEC teams playing against each other again, and then two Big Ten teams playing against each other. And I don't think we'll ever get to the end of the argument who's SEC, Big Ten, who's the better, who deserves more. If it ends up this way, this would be a travesty, Coach. I think this would be the biggest travesty of the 12-team playoff if it played out this way, Coach.
I agree. I also think that, we've had this discussion before that by giving the conference champions, when they're not the highest ranked teams, the bye, what it really affects is the path to the championship. And when you don't see the teams based on the quality of the total season performance, the number one seed should have technically the easiest path to the championship. And that doesn't really happen when you allow conference champions to get seated in the top four when they're not one of the top four teams. So I'm with you 100%. But I did have one comment when you were talking about, Miami playing in cold weather and guys blowing on their hands. I just wanted to give them one coaching point that I got when I was a baseball player, and I had a really tough coach. And we'd blow on our hands when it was cold, and you know how it feels when you hit that ball and you got cold hands, and we'd blow on our hands. And his coaching point was, don't blow on your hands. You're not allowed to blow on your hands. Stick them up your ass. That's the only
way. The same outcome, huh? Nice. You're saying it's the same outcome there either way. That is the warmest part of your body, right? Don't they say that is the warmest part of the body? The cold is a real equalizer, and we had just started chatting about it this week, really. And I think, anybody that's followed college football or got a chance to go around college football understands that the vibe across the entire Southeastern Conference is different than anywhere else. And if you've never experienced it, you obviously can turn on a television and watch any of these SEC games outside of Vandy any other year than this year. Yeah. And it is a romp. It's all they got. It is their religion. It is their passion. It is their sport across the board. Now, in the Big Ten, obviously, Penn State fills up 100-some thousand. Michigan fills up 100-some thousand. Ohio State fills up 100-some thousand. Oregon will be able to pack out whatever they want over there. But across the board, it's not everywhere is this insane environment. So tough to win, obviously, on the road in the Southeastern Conference. The cold, though, being an equalizer as kind of the battle there for some of these Southern teams having to come up and play in the cold. I think that is what the Big Ten would respond with in that argument. Like, yeah, maybe our environment isn't 100-some thousand, and that's because our environment doesn't even make it conducive to happen. But the cold weather, I think, is the equalizer in this entire thing for some of these Big Ten teams. And if we end up with no Southern teams going into the Big Ten territory, boy, that would be that would be a big miss. That would be a big. And then on the flip side, Big Ten schools having to go down into the South. That would be a travesty if we didn't have that. Don't you think, Coach? Legitimately, you coach in the Big Ten and the SEC. That's literally two different worlds of football there.
I don't think there's any question about it, but I do think that the weather does impact the game. The ball is harder to throw. The ball is harder to catch. It's harder to hold on to. You have these rules. Like I had a rule all the time, which my guys hated, that if you were a ball handler or a ball carrier, you couldn't wear sleeves. Because I always thought that the sleeves made it slicker. When you put 3 pressure points on the ball would slide out easier and you'd be more susceptible to turnovers. All right, so it does have a huge impact. And the other thing is these young guys that play in the Southeastern Conference now, very few of them have ever played in cold weather. at least in the NFL, like when I was at the Dolphins and we had to go play in Buffalo and New England and the New York Jets in December or January, the players at least got exposed to that to some point, and you had players on your team from all over the country, so some of them were used to it. Well, these guys in the Southeastern Conference are probably not going to be used to that, and it could have a huge impact on the game.
Yeah, I think so too, especially with what happened. I mean, it's literally showcased in a lot of different situations. You talk about the Dolphins getting to play in AFC East matchups up in the cold weather climates. Then whenever they got to Kansas City and it was literally frozen, they looked like a completely different team. That is an equalizer for a team that might not be as fast, a team that might not be able to throw it as much, and for an environment that doesn't have 100-some thousand. Last weekend on Saturday, it was full chaos in the SEC, brother. I mean, full chaos. After that Indiana-Ohio State game, I thought Indiana's out. I thought, man, there's going to be they gave the committee an excuse to leave them out. Like, they gave them a reason to argue. And then everything unfolds in the SEC the way it does with a lot of teams that are kind of down there. And then Colorado loses. And then Army, who's obviously also in the conversation, loses. But the SEC, full chaos this past weekend. What does that mean, you think? Does that mean that every week that you win is a big win in these major conferences? Or what do you think is the big message out of what happened on Saturday?
Yeah, well, I think the playoffs have been a great thing for college football, but I also think the playoffs have made people more outcome oriented. Like if a coach stands up and talks about getting into playoffs and you got to go to Oklahoma and play, I'm just using Alabama as an example, and you got to beat Auburn in the Iron Bowl, your focus needs to be on what do I have to do to play well in the game that I'm playing in? Like, what's important now? What's important now is the game you're playing in now, the play that you're playing, the quarter that you're in. And all these teams are good enough, especially in the SEC. It's such a deep conference, that a 5-5 team is a good enough team to beat, probably anyone in the conference. So you can't ever let your hair down in any kind of way and not be psychologically ready to play. And I think, when you watch the game, things that are indicators that guys don't have the right mental intensity to play is missed tackles, guys missing blocks up front, guys dropping balls. Those are kind of lack of concentration things that come from not having the right mindset. And that means you didn't approach it right in practice for that week. And then when you show up for the game and you think you're just going to show up and win, it just doesn't happen that way. So, it should be a lesson for everybody. But I think we have more roller coasters, in college football right now than we've ever had before. I think part of that is the players are temporarily committed. That's totally different than be totally committed to your team and to your performance. These guys can be thinking about, well, I'm not getting enough playing time. I'm not catching enough passes. Where am I going to go next year? I mean, all those things are distractions in terms of what your performance is and what your focus is on the task at hand and what your commitment to it is.
Yeah, because you're not really playing for school. I'm not saying this is not everybody, not everywhere, because obviously there's some places that have people all in playing the right way. Oregon hasn't lost. Obviously, they've had no hiccups. There's other schools that are dominating and everything like that. But we were talking about this, I think, with Aaron yesterday, about him catching up with his Cal teammates from 2004, 20 years ago or whatever, and they started telling stories or what it was. And he was like, it was an immediate reminder that we were like playing for each other, and that was what college always used to be. College always used to be that way. I think that's why a lot of us older guys, we're old, screaming at the clouds. Like when these kids started sitting out of bowl games, we understood the business decision, but it was like, this is one last time with the boys too. Like it was almost it's a completely different mindset. And I think it's all because what the world is right now. So I don't hold it against them, but how do you get people to stay committed to team? I don't know, and the boys, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any question that I agree with you 100% that what we've created is a system that promotes self-indulgent behavior. In other words, how does this affect me? We used to be on a team where the first thing you thought about is how does it affect the team? And if you made a mistake or whatever, it killed you because you were letting your teammates down. I don't know if you can blame the players for this, but I think we can blame the system to some degree because it promotes this. I mean, everything about the system promotes this. You're not as committed to your team. You can leave whenever you want. You got guys getting in the portal in the middle of the season.
Starters.
And then you got guys worrying about where they're going to go based on how much money they're going to make or how much playing time they're going to get. So, a lot of these things have these guys are 18, 19, 20 years old. All right. So it's more difficult to handle those things when you're that age. I don't think I could have handled it when I was in college. I mean, it was enough for me to handle what I needed to handle and behave well enough to get by in those days. So I just think it's really, really difficult for these guys to stay focused at the level they need to stay focused at. And the real bottom line of it all is everything's based on performance. So what kind of value are you creating for yourself if you're not committed to being the best player that you can be? You're not creating value for yourself. You're not creating value for your future. It's going to affect where you get drafted. So, I mean, all these things are like, anti-development, I call it, which is not a good thing for college players.
Both football and human, I mean, that is, and I think about if I was at this age, with this time, with this access to money, there's no way I would remain focused on kicking footballs. No chance. With this thing right here, I can make a beard disappear in a half a second. Okay, cool. All I got to do is do this, put it up on the internet, then I can sell merch. It's like there's so many. For a lot of people, sports was an avenue to change the trajectory of your family tree. Okay, so I was one of those people. I think there's a lot of those people that are in there. Kush was one of those guys. Like, that was the main goal. That was hey, this is what we're working towards. This is how we do this. And I wasn't perfect by any means, but it was like trying to get to the money. But now you can get to the money and you don't really. That's like, if these kids are able to remain mentally tough and focused, it's almost like they're way better than we ever were, the kids that could do that. Right. But I could see how the distractions would get. It would have got me like that. I mean, there would have been you too, probably
100%.
I mean, there is no chance. So good on these dudes that are able to stay focused. But I do think we're losing some shit. Yeah. I think we're losing some shit.
Any question about it? And one of the great things about sports, all being a part of a team. That's a hell of an experience, how to work with other people, how to buy into principles and values, how to trust and respect in those things, how to trust and respect your teammates, how to have the kind of work ethic you needed to be successful, to reach your potential, to persevere through good and bad times, to learn from failings, to deal with success, to overcome adversity, to pride in performance. I mean, you got all these things that were great virtues of athletics that we all learned. And if I didn't play on teams when I was growing up and in college and have the opportunity to be involved in a team, I could have never had the kind of successful career that I had, as a coach or even in business or anything else, because those lessons are not something that you can learn everywhere in our society, but you certainly can learn them by being a part of a team.
Yeah, everything you just said there about sports is why we love it. And that's why we love it. I mean, and I don't know if you mentioned it there. I tried to listen to all the gospel you were preaching there that we love. And the church of sport is a beautiful one. Working when you're tired too. Like that's a whole nother thing. Like, well, I'm tired. Well, the game don't care. Like the game's gonna happen. You have to play in it. So you either figure the shit out or work through it, or you're gonna get embarrassed. Yeah. So it's like all those things I think are crucial to development of humans. And to your point, without it, I would be nowhere near the human. I wouldn't be. I'd be flipping.
The driving force that we all had too, Pat, was none of us wanted to be irrelevant. Nobody wants to be irrelevant. I mean, if you think back when you were kids and we would pick a baseball team, and they put the bat, who gets picked, everybody wanted to get picked. Nobody wanted to be irrelevant. So now what is the value of being somebody that somebody wants to pick? I mean, have we destroyed that? I mean, would you pick yourself if you're out there as a player that's leaving your team after 4 games or in the middle of the season or whatever? I mean, would you pick yourself?
I think
nobody wants to be irrelevant.
And nobody talks about the dudes that just they say they're hitting transfer portal, and then guess what? You live there now.
Yeah.
Everybody hears the story of like somebody hitting the transfer portal, getting signed somewhere. Cam Ward gets paid big. He's down in Miami. They completely change their entire franchise. You hear that story. What you don't hear about is the wide receiver that maybe didn't get enough balls one year somewhere and hits transfer portal thinking that the grass is going to be greener. And guess what? It's a wild time in college ball, but somehow you got to remain focused. At this part of the season, though, there are some big situations that could brew. Conman's got a question for you.
Yeah, Coach, this didn't happen to your team, but a lot of these teams that are going into the rivalry weekend really have nothing to play for but to ruin their rival season. As one of those coaches who is coaching one of the teams that, is still playing for something, still can go get it, still can go to the playoff. How do you address your team when you know going into this week, like, hey, this is the other team's Super Bowl? Like, if we don't have complete focus, then our rival is going to hang their hat on their entire offseason because they beat us during this game.
Yeah, well, the one thing that I always try to do, and it was always difficult in this game, when we played in the Iron Bowl, at the end of the season, and sometimes we had a lot on the line and we needed to win that game, and it probably meant more to them because it would be something that would save their season, but yet we were playing for more than just that game. So, and understanding the importance of these rivalry games to the fans and bragging rights for the year and all that, but the anxiety that's created by the multiple of it is a big rivalry game, which means a lot, but the consequences of that mean something in the future was always something that I tried to manage because, to me, having too much anxiety is not good for performance. So you wanted the players to be able to stay in the right place psychologically so they can go out there, compete, and have fun and not worry about the outcome so much that it affected their performance. You've heard me say this before, our team in whatever year we lost to Tennessee in the last play of the game, up there, and we lost to LSU on the last play of the game. Our team, I hate to say we choked, and I don't mean it that way, but there was so much anxiety because those guys were so concerned about winning those games that they made mental errors at the end of the game that they typically would not make because the anxiety overcame them. In terms of focusing on the results. So the thing that I always try to do is, hey, play one play at a time, like it has a history of a life of its own. Stay focused on that. That's what creates value for you. And you're not going to dominate the competition on the first play of the game. It's going to take 50 plays to do it, so you got to keep grinding. That's the way I always tried to play. I try to get them to stay in the moment as much as I could, and I always thought that was helpful. And the teams that didn't do that didn't have success.
Okay, so on that note, AQ has a question for you because this is a new setup with the way this 12-team playoff is going to operate.
Yeah, Coach, every single team is going to have about a month layoff going into this. What did you always tell your teams when you have that long of a layoff, and how did you keep them staying sharp during that whole process?
Yeah, well, I was different than everybody else, and in my early days as a coach, I always tried to practice the team from the momentum of the end of the game to the next game, which was, like you say, it's a long time in between. And we played horrible. I mean, we were horrible. Not bad, horrible. All right, so then I got to the point where I just said, let's approach it like a one-game season. And I would look at the date that we were going to play, and I'd go back to where we could have 10 or 11 practices, and then whatever time was left in between, I just said, hey, you guys lift weights. You can have 7-on-7 amongst yourselves. The coaches aren't going to be around. I don't want you to focus on this psychologically until we start practicing, 10 or 11 days before the game. We'll do a little conditioning to try to keep you in shape. And that's how we approached it, and we played a hell of a lot better, all right, because if you practice too long for a game, to me, your team is going to be flat by the time you get to the game. So, like a lot of things we did ass backwards, that probably was ass backwards, but it worked.
Yeah, because the team gets exhausted of it, I assume.
Exhausted.
Yeah, anytime people get bored with stuff. And I'm not saying athletes get bored with competition, but if it's just the same thing every single day for a month, you could see how people would get sick of it. 10 to 11 days before the game sounds like a genius idea. Still getting a little extra bonus, prep. We're keeping the guys in shape, and they don't hate us.
Yeah.
They don't hate us by the end of this. That's not a bad play.
AQ told me one time that Paterno did something where, like, the starters for that first 2 or 3 weeks or whatever only did individuals, and then underclassmen who weren't starters, they did the team stuff. And then once, just like Coach said, they're like 10 days before the game, then they got back into that normal practice.
It was like training camp almost.
Yeah.
That's I mean, you only played a few of those games.
Yeah.
So.
That's all.
How many years were you at Bama?
17.
How many years were you guys in like a big time game? Do you know?
I think 11. Well, 14. Depends on how you figure it. We were in the playoffs 12 times. Okay, and I think so. People talk about the 7 that we won, but I focus on the 5 that we lost, whether we got beat in the championship game or in the playoffs in the first round. And most of the time, it was something that we could have done better. It was something that was avoidable. And that's the hardest thing, when you're a competitor or whether it's a coach or player, if you lose because of something that you could have avoided through better preparation or, better knowledge and experience. And I always felt like, except for one time when, we played Oklahoma and Miami in the Orange Bowl, and then we had to go out there to California to play Clemson. And we got out there 4 days before the game, so it was a tough trip. There was 8 days in between games. We were as far away as we could be. The travel was tough. The preparation was tough. And then we got out there and it rained, and there was no place in San Jose to practice. So we didn't get to practice, and we got our ass handed to us. That's the only game that I felt like we just got beat.
Okay, so should have 11 national championships. That's the thought. You've done good, Coach. Yeah. We're so thankful we get to talk to you every single week, legit. And the fact that you're a hilarious dude, too. Mm-hmm. I get a chance to do dinner with this guy on Friday nights. Lucky to do that. What a time. You're a hilarious dude. How about Oz? Hey, how about Oz the Mentalist? That was wild, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That motherfucker's might be a demon.
Yeah, you're right.
I FaceTimed Oz from dinner because we had talked about Oz to Coach Saban over the last couple of weeks. It's like, hey, you needed this thing, this thing.
Yeah, but he didn't get the score of the game right. You said 34-27.
Bingo.
Yeah.
It was 38-11. I was paying special attention to that.
Hey, he would say, I assume, well, they're going to play again. Like that's probably
threw us off.
He'll probably say that they'll have a chance to play again. But if the Niners don't get going soon, I don't know if they're going to be meeting each other again in the future. All right, let's talk a little bit about the playoff judgment again. And Coach, obviously, your thoughts are very important on this. Tone has a thought.
Yeah, Coach. There's some teams out there like Texas, Notre Dame, Penn State, Indiana, who a lot of people are saying they haven't played anybody or beaten anyone good yet. If you were on the committee and say their strength of schedules are pretty even and their records pretty even, what would you look at if you were determining their ranking? Like when you're watching film or something like that, what would be most important to you?
Well, I hate to make comparisons, but I actually think they get it closer to right in basketball because they have all these RPI things and, strength of schedule, who you beat, how many good teams you beat. Not necessarily how many you played, but how many you beat. Mm-hmm. I think that should be a real consideration. But I do think as we boil down to this, like right now, hard to reward a team with 3 losses, especially the kind of losses that Ole Miss had and like Alabama's had to, pretty 500 teams, I'm going to call them. So pretty average teams where, you got some other teams that maybe they didn't play the same competition, but they didn't lose games to average teams either. So I think that matters. And the only team that could have an argument to get in with 3 losses, if Georgia actually plays in the SEC championship game, they really shouldn't be penalized if they would happen to lose the game. They would end up with 3 losses. But I don't think a team that didn't play in the championship game that has 2 losses should get in, especially if they played a good game and it wasn't a blowout. So,
yeah, we want to put the college football playoff committee. I think Reese does too. Every week he asks them, like, "Hey, can you just say that if you play in the SEC championship, you're good? Yeah. Or if you play in the Big Ten championship, you're good? Can you say that these are the 2 leading conferences this year?" And they said, we'll just judge, obviously we hold championships in high regard. We will watch how they play in those games. So I think what they're saying, Ward Manuel's saying, without saying anything, is like, if they look like a good team, we will reward them for being in the championship. But if they get steamrolled in this thing, it's like it will be held against them. We're trying to read through the lines there, but I think they will get rewarded if they end up playing in the championship. I think naturally humans in that place will reward that. I hope, at least.
But the subjective part of this that you can never fix is the conferences are not equal. They're not equal in depth of good teams, nor are they equal in the quality of the best teams. So to give you an example, let's just take Ole Miss, so I stay away from this whole Alabama thing. So if Ole Miss played in the Big 12, what would their record be?
They probably have one loss. That's
the kind of subjective issues that we have in college football that's never going to change unless we take the best 40 teams in college football and put them in a league very similar to the 32 teams that are in the NFL. And then the competition level is probably going to be, more equal, so that now you could actually say beating good teams because you're playing good teams all the time. I've always said that we should nobody should play Mercer. Nobody should play a 1AA school. Everybody should have to play these top 40 teams, and then you'd have a better idea of, okay, who are the best teams here. But consistency in performance means something, and that's why in Ole Miss and Alabama's case, they didn't have consistency in performance. They lost to teams they probably shouldn't have lost to, so there should be a penalty for that as well.
But then the counter argument, not that SEC needs more counter arguments, but like in the NFL right now, a week after you play the Lions, teams are like 0-11 or something like that. So it's like you, in the deeper conferences, we'll say Big Ten and SEC right now, like big games every week means something too, as opposed to like a big game, JV game, big game, JV game, which some of these things are. And once again, I just got baptized in the college football world like 4 years ago. So I'm just kind of watching it. But if it did, since it is going to a revenue share model, seemingly going to a salary cap model, is seemingly what everything is kind of going towards. April 8th, we'll get the final ruling on it. Do you think there's ever a chance for that top 40 league to ever happen? That would be a lot of people agreeing to a lot of shit, right? Sankey would have to talk to Petiti. Petiti would have to talk to all these other people. It would be the NCAA would have to agree. That'd be a lot of people that would have to agree on something, right, Coach?
A lot of people would have to agree on something, but like I always say, it's not about the money, it's about how much. But if you had a league like that, they would be able to have a better TV contract, more revenue, and a lot of decisions are getting made in college athletics now, which is different than it used to be in the old days about what are the financial consequences of all this. So I do think there's a possibility, although I agree with you, it would be a ton of changes.
Yeah. There'd be a lot of people having to agree to a lot of things, and a lot of people having to succeed a lot of things, and then obviously a lot of people getting used to brand new things. It'd be crazy, and we can't lose what college ball is, though. Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that is going to happen too is even if we have revenue sharing, how many actual teams out there can afford to do $20 million to pay players and still be able to function in the programs that they have? So they're either going to have to drop sports or not be able to compete because they can't afford to pay the players.
Jeez, I thought that money was just automatically popping out of thin air. That's what I thought was happening.
What the hell?
I didn't know that. I thought that money was just showing up. I actually never even thought about how the money's getting. I'm just like, all of them. Everybody's getting the same. It's like, no, you got to produce that now. It's like, whoa. Wild time to be alive. Coach, can't wait to see you down in Texas. Happy Thanksgiving. What are we doing for the holiday?
This will be the first time in a long time that we don't have 25 players over for Thanksgiving, which I always enjoyed. It was a great experience to spend time with players in a non-football atmosphere. But it's also something we're looking forward to for the first time to just have family.
Yeah.
To just have your family there. So that's going to be great. But I wish you guys a great Thanksgiving. It's a great holiday. It's time for us to all have gratitude for all the things that we have and not focus so much on what we don't have. So it's a good thing.
We're grateful as hell for you, ladies and gentlemen. The GOAT. Tell Miss Terry and the family we said happy Thanksgiving. Nick Saban.
Yay.
Thank you, Coach.